With Captain Marvel releasing at the end of the week and Avengers Endgame a mere 2 months away, it is time to go back and either rewatch or watch for the first time all of the movies in the MCU. Today, I'm going to give you guys the definitive, or at least my definitive order on how you should go about doing that. What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. If you are a fan of comic books, comic book movies, superheroes, or Marvel movies, this is the place for you because this week we are talking Captain Marvel and all things in the MCU, and we are starting off with this little video idea that I actually got from my friend texting me and asking me what order he should watch all of the films in the MCU, and because he is going back and rewatching them and his wife has never seen the film. So that's who this video is intended for. Anyone who wants to rewatch all of the movies in preparation and anticipation of Avengers Endgame, or anybody who has just never seen certain films, wants to go back, fill in all of the empty spaces, and just get prepped for potentially one of the biggest movies of all time. I have good faith that it will be. And even though I'm not ranking the films, that will be later on in the week after I see Captain Marvel, I want you guys to get down in the comments and tell me, do you like the order that I'm giving you today? What order would you put these movies in, going back and rewatching them? And what is your favorite movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Let's get into this video because it's gonna be a beast. Now, there are many orders you can go about watching all of the films in the franchise. You can go in order of release date and start with Iron Man all the way back in 2008, or you can go by trilogies. I have seen some people do that, watch all of the Iron Man movies, all of the Captain America movies, so on and so forth, and then get into the individual films. Or you can do what I'm going to be doing today and go by the actual timeline of events. Now, there are a few variations of this. Certain films that I'm going to tell you guys are not necessarily prior to the other ones on this list, and because of that, some of the post-credit scenes might be a tad bit confusing, but they're still fun to watch. I'm going to make slight variations and tweak a few things. I will get into that as we go, but this will, for the most part, be following the timeline of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and we start all the way back with the very first superhero in that universe, Captain America, the First Avenger. And this, in my opinion, is the perfect way to start the MCU because this takes place in the early 1940s. This is when Captain America first gets his powers and really establishes the fact that we can have superhumans in this universe. Now, from there is a long span of time between movies. Not many things take place movie-wise. Of course, you have flashbacks in other MCU films and, of course, Agent Carter on television, but it is not until the 1990s when we hit on our next Marvel film, and that is actually a movie that has not hit theaters yet. That is Captain Marvel. I would say Captain Marvel is the #2 film that you need to watch. And I'm not going to say rewatch because a lot of people will be watching this for the first time. So here's what you do this week. Go back and watch Captain America, the First Avenger, and then immediately go out to the theater and check out Captain Marvel because timeline-wise, now I don't know what's going to happen at the end of that film, and of course we will have post-credit scenes. Those may take place later on in the future, but the movie itself, for the most part, will take place in the 90s. And I think it's a nice follow-up, something different than the First Avenger. The First Avenger is as grounded as that story can possibly be. Something like Captain Marvel, it takes place in space, it's going to be out there. I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the film yet, but as of right now, I'm putting it at #2. But if you want to wait until later on down the line after you've watched all of the other films, I wouldn't be opposed to that either. Then, of course, we hit Tony Stark. You got the chance to meet his father, Howard Stark, in Captain America, the First Avenger. Now you get to see his son flourish and become Iron Man for the very first time. This takes place in 2010 in the MCU, and right after the first Iron Man, you can go straight into the sequel because timeline-wise, that was, I believe, the next thing that happened. Iron Man 2 is an okay follow-up to the first. I'm not going to say it's my favorite Marvel film, but if you're in the Tony Stark and Iron Man mode, you will want to move on to something else that is starring him, and I think that's the perfect way to do it. Up next, you have two films that are taking place around the same time in the MCU, in the same year as Iron Man 2, but I would actually say to go with The Incredible Hulk next because there is a bit of a jarring element going from Edward Norton to Mark Ruffalo, from there to the Avengers, so I would put a movie in between that and say The Incredible Hulk is up next. And if you watch the post-credit scene to that film, it works out perfectly with Tony Stark coming in and talking to General Ross. Now, the next movie on this list is Thor. This is taking place in Asgard around the same time as this. Of course, there are flash forwards and flashbacks, but for the most part, you're following continuity here, and you get to take a break from everything happening on planet Earth. That's the beauty of the MCU. You get to go from Earth to space to Earth to another planet, and it is so cool how it all flows. And if you're watching it in in this order, you're going to want to suspend disbelief a bit more every now and then, and taking a trip to Asgard and watching the Loki origin story, the storyline between those two brothers getting fleshed out, is really fun and entertaining. Now, after watching all of these movies, seeing them come together for the very first time in The Avengers is the next way to go, because it only makes sense, and The Avengers is going to completely blow your mind if you have never seen it, especially after taking in hours and hours of origin stories for these heroes. Now, Captain Marvel, you've already seen this film if you're following this timeline. She is taking a break for a while, but she will be back very soon, in a couple of months actually. But The Avengers is the ultimate collaboration of these heroes we have been building up. Up next is Iron Man 3, taking a trip back to Tony Stark's world and seeing the fallout of what's happening in his mind after the Avengers. It is a very cool film to watch right after that, because you go from super far out there things happening and sort of back to reality with a slightly dark premise. Now, if you want to see another sequel, and I would recommend going in this direction because we just saw what happened with Loki, this is the fallout of that situation. Not my favorite film in the MCU. It could potentially be my least favorite, but I'm not going to say skip it because there are very important plot points in this film, and that takes place in 2013. Now, in 2014, there are 3 movies in the MCU that take place. A lot of people will tell you to watch one movie first and then watch the other 2 films, but I'm going to go in a different direction. I'm going to say watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1, the first one, as the next movie on this timeline. I believe Guardians is such a nice change of pace from the rest of the MCU, and after you see that first one, go right into the sequel, because timeline-wise, it takes place shortly after, and you will want to see what else happens with these characters because it's such a different feeling and experience from the rest of the Avengers movies. I know people who like Guardians and don't like any of the Avengers films, so to take both of those movies in part 1 and part 2 is, I believe, the perfect way to do it. Now, the next film on this list is Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and like I said, most people will tell you to watch this right after Thor: The Dark World, but I believe this film takes you back to reality and kind of bleeds into the next film on this list. Now, if you have never seen The Winter Soldier, prepare yourself, because this movie is awesome. You talk about a change of pace. Well, this is, of course, a bit back to reality, but this is a spy espionage thriller, and the Russo brothers, their first film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You begin to see their takeover of this world, if you will. And our next movie on this list is then Age of Ultron. The Captain America storyline, the Iron Man storyline, and the Thor storyline all converge in this sequel to the first Avengers. And I think it's so interesting to see where all of these heroes that we have been watching for such a long time are at in their lives. Now, the next film on this list is the first Ant-Man as we move on into the next phase of the MCU. This takes place right after Avengers Age of Ultron in 2015 in the timeline, not when it released, but this movie is so much fun. It is the first straight up comedy, not really mixing with other genres other than slightly a heist film, and it has a nice lead in towards the end to the next movie on this list, which is Captain America: Civil War. This takes place in 2016. We get to see Ant-Man come straight from his movie into this film, and then all of those storylines that I have been talking about throughout the entire video coming together once again, except this time they are not working together, they are clashing, they are butting heads, and what the Russo brothers do with this film is just as entertaining and interesting as The Winter Soldier. At this point, you know these heroes, and hopefully you love these heroes at this point. If you're still watching the movies and you're keeping up with this timeline, then I think you're enjoying what you're seeing so far. But Civil War, trust me, if you have never seen this movie, up next, I'm going to switch things up a little bit. I'm going to go Black Panther because we just got the beginning of his storyline in Civil War. Now, you could throw Spider-Man: Homecoming next on this list, but I'm going straight to Wakanda and seeing how what happened with his father in Civil War applies to what is happening in Black Panther. I really enjoy that storyline. I like where this next movie goes. It kind of separates itself from the rest of the MCU, but at the end of this film, as you will see, it ties right back in, and it is a nice lead up to what is going to happen in Avengers: Infinity War. Then after separating yourself from the MCU a bit in Wakanda, you can go back to what is happening in the United States with Spider-Man: Homecoming, the next film I would recommend on this list. I wouldn't be opposed to switching these two films, like I said, because this does hit on a lot of things, even more than Black Panther, that happened in Civil War, but I just like a nice change of pace every now and then. Civil War is kind of based in the reality as we know, and so is Spider-Man: Homecoming. Black Panther is more out there in a different world, if you will. sequel, even though not technically, so I would do that and then come to Spider-Man Homecoming and be prepared to laugh like crazy. For the next two movies, really, Spider-Man Homecoming is as close to a John Hughes film in the MCU as you're going to find, and it follows up on both Peter Parker's and Tony Stark's storyline from Civil War, so that is really cool to see. Now, something else following up on Civil War, the third movie really, is Ant-Man and the Wasp, as you get to see where Scott Lang goes after the fallout of the war between the superheroes. Such a funny movie once again. I really like all of these side characters, seeing them all come back to play. Now, the end of this film ties a bit more into Infinity War, so it might be a tad bit confusing in terms of post-credit scenes, but I don't think it's going to throw you off too much, and it's cool to see how all three of these movies, seeing the fallout from Civil War, really, and then the post-credit scenes really tying them into how Infinity War is going to go. You thought you were done with introducing no characters? Nope, because the next movie that I'm going to recommend, we're almost done with this recap, but I would say go Doctor Strange as your next film on this list. This movie takes place throughout like 3 or 4 films in the MCU, as it starts in 2016 and it ends in 2017, but it separates itself just enough that it really doesn't matter when you watch Doctor Strange. You can watch it here, you can watch it 2 or 3 spots back, but I would recommend this just because it's so far out there and crazy and zany. It's nice to see what our other characters are doing and establishing really how important Doctor Strange is going to be in Avengers Infinity War. And the post-credit scene ties in perfectly to the next to last film on this MCU catch-up, and that is Thor Ragnarok. I say Thor Ragnarok almost last because it ties in perfectly to Avengers Infinity War. It's so far removed from watching the second Thor film that you've had time to kind of forget about it, take a breath, and want more Thor. And if you want more Thor, you're going to get more Thor in this film. And Hulk, this is such a different movie from the first 2 in this trilogy, and for me, I absolutely loved it. So refreshing. One of my favorite MCU films in general. It is so funny and awesome, and it takes place on different worlds, and the ending is the ultimate setup to what happens in Avengers Infinity War, and that, of course, is the final movie on this list. If we are catching up to Avengers Endgame, this is the culmination of everything that the MCU has been building up for the last 10, 11-ish years, and it is such an incredible feat, an accomplishment that really can't be replicated both on the scale and box office wise and critic wise, guys. I love this movie. Not everyone loves Infinity War as much as me, but I think we can all agree that the buildup has been worth it, because Infinity War at least paid off on a bunch of these storylines, and if it did not for you, then Endgame has a chance to either save this franchise for people on one side or complete this franchise in the ultimate way for people on the other side. Either way, I appreciate you guys watching this video. One last time, here is the order in which I would watch the Marvel Cinematic Universe from beginning all the way until, right now, the end. And that is it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to hear my thoughts on Captain Marvel, that will be Thursday night. Cannot wait to see that film and review it. If you want to hear my actual thoughts on these films, hopefully the very next day I will be doing my new ranking of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films. Tell you guys what is my least favorite all the way until my favorite. That's going to be a hard list to figure out because I'm constantly switching things, so stay tuned to this channel. This really is a Marvel Cinematic Universe week, a Captain Marvel week. This was my chance to tell you guys what order I would watch. Now, like I said, it is not the definitive order. When I say that, I'm just joking around. It is just the order that I would recommend based off timeline, when things are happening, how you need a break from certain things, and then getting back into other things, guys. This was so much fun. I had a blast doing this video. Like I said, get down in the comments section below. If you like this video, be sure to leave it a thumbs up. Thank you for everything that you do, truly. I appreciate you guys more than you will ever know. And I will be back very soon with another video.